The Nowata Methodist Church is happy to produce a lot of different content for the edification of Christ's church throughout the world. This daily segment that you're listening to right now corresponds with the Daily Bible Reading Challenge, which is hosted by Christ Church in Moscow, Idaho. If you want to download the list of readings that they publish for yourself or learn more about this challenge, this initiative, go to BibleReading.ChristKirk.com. I'm Jeffrey Rickman. I'm the pastor here in Nowata, and I read from the Berean Standard Bible, which you can also find at Berean.Bible. Consider subscribing to this podcast to be a part of this daily effort to grow in familiarity with and love of God's holy word. Let's dive in for today. Hey y'all, I'm back in the studio for today. Finally felt good enough to get over here. If you don't know who I am, I'm Jeffrey. I'm the preacher here, and I've been reading the scriptures every day for hopefully to get all my people reading the scriptures every day. If you hear any background noise, it's my 2-year-old daughter. She likes to be with me. It's going to be okay. All right, so we've been reading Leviticus and Hebrews. We're going to conclude these soon, but for right now, we're just going to do 4 more chapters in Leviticus and 2 more chapters in Hebrews. Let's dive in. Leviticus 17. Let's attend upon God's word together. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Speak to Aaron, his sons, and all the Israelites, and tell them this is what the Lord has commanded. Anyone from the house of Israel who slaughters an ox, a lamb, or a goat in the camp or outside of it, instead of bringing it to the entrance to the tent of meeting to present it as an offering to the Lord before his tabernacle, that man shall incur blood guilt. He has shed blood and must be cut off from among his people. For this reason, the Israelites will bring to the Lord the sacrifices they have been offering in the open fields. They are to bring them to the priest at the entrance to the tent of meeting and offer them as sacrifices of peace to the Lord. The priest will then sprinkle the blood on the altar of the Lord at the entrance to the tent of meeting and burn the fat as a pleasing aroma to the Lord. They must no longer offer their sacrifices to the goat demons to which they have prostituted themselves. This will be a permanent statute for them for the generations to come. Tell them that if anyone from the house of Israel or any foreigner living among them offers a burnt offering or a sacrifice, but does not bring it to the entrance to the tent of meeting to sacrifice it to the Lord, that man must be cut off from his people. If anyone from the house of Israel or a foreigner living among them eats any blood, I will set my face against that person and cut him off from among his people. For the life of the flesh is in the blood, and I have given it to you to make atonement for your souls upon the altar. For it is the blood that makes atonement for the soul. Therefore I say to the Israelites, none of you may eat blood, nor may any foreigner living among you eat blood. And if any Israelite or foreigner living among them hunts down a wild animal or bird that may be eaten, he must drain its blood and cover it with dirt. For the life of all flesh is its blood. Therefore I have told the Israelites, you must not eat the blood of any living thing, because the life of all flesh is its blood. Whoever eats it must be cut off. And any person, whether native or foreigner, who eats anything found, dead or mauled by wild beasts, must wash his clothes and bathe with water, and he will be unclean until evening. Then he will be clean. But if he does not wash his clothes and bathe himself, then he shall bear his iniquity. Leviticus 18. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Speak to the Israelites and tell them, I am the Lord your God. You must not follow the practices of the land of Egypt where you used to live, and you must not follow the practices of the land of Canaan into which I am bringing you. You must not walk in their customs. You are to practice my judgments and keep my statutes by walking in them. I am the Lord your God. Keep my statutes and my judgments, for the man who does these things will live by them. I am the Lord. None of you are to approach any close relative to have sexual relations. I am the Lord. You must not expose the nakedness of your father by having sexual relations with your mother. She's your mother. You must not have sexual relations with her. You must not have sexual relations with your father's wife. It would dishonor your father. You must not have sexual relations with your sister, either your father's daughter or your mother's daughter, whether she was born in the same home or elsewhere. You must not have sexual relations with your son's daughter or your daughter's daughter, for that would be shame on your family. You must not have sexual relations with the daughter of your father's wife, born to your father. She is your sister. You must not have sexual relations with your father's sister. She is your father's close relative. You must not have sexual relations with your mother's sister, for she is your mother's close relative. You must not dishonor your father's brother by approaching his wife to have sexual relations with her. She's your aunt. You must not have sexual relations with your daughter-in-law. She is your son's wife. You are not to have sexual relations with her. You must not have sexual relations with your brother's wife. That would shame your brother. You must not have sexual relations with both a woman and her daughter. You are not to marry her son's daughter or her daughter's daughter and have sexual relations with her. They are close relatives. It is depraved. You must not take your wife's sister as a rival wife and have sexual relations with her while your wife is alive. You must not approach a woman to have sexual relations with her during her menstrual period. You must not lie carnally with your neighbor's wife and thus defile yourself with her. You must not give any of your children to be sacrificed to Molech, for you must not profane the name of your God. I am the Lord. You must not lie with a man as with a woman. That is an abomination. You must not lie carnally with any animal, thus defiling yourself with it. A woman must not stand before an animal to mate with it. That is a perversion. Do not defile yourselves by any of these practices, for by all these things the nations I am driving out before you have defiled themselves. Even the land has become defiled, so I am punishing it for its sin, and the land will vomit out its inhabitants. But you are to keep my statutes and ordinances, and you must not commit any of these abominations, neither your native-born nor the foreigner who lives among you. For the men who were in the land before you committed all these abominations, and the land has become defiled. So if you defile the land, it will vomit you out, as it spewed out the nations before you. Therefore, anyone who commits any of these abominations must be cut off from among his people. You must keep my charge not to practice any of the abominable customs that were practiced before you, so that you do not defile yourselves by them. I am the Lord your God. Leviticus 19. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Speak to the whole congregation of Israel and tell them, 'Be holy, because I, the Lord your God, am holy. Each of you must respect his mother and father, and you must keep my Sabbaths. I am the Lord your God. Do not turn to idols or make for yourselves molten gods. I am the Lord your God. When you sacrifice a peace offering to the Lord, you shall offer it for your acceptance. It shall be eaten on the day you sacrifice it, or on the next day, but what remains on the third day must be burned up. If any of it is eaten on the third day, it is tainted and will not be accepted. Whoever eats it will bear his iniquity, for he has profaned what is holy to the Lord. That person must be cut off from his people. When you reap the harvest of your land, you are not to reap the very edges of your field or gather the gleanings of your harvest. You must not strip your vineyard bare or gather its fallen grapes. Leave them for the poor and foreigner. I am the Lord your God. You must not steal. You must not lie or deceive one another. You must not swear falsely by my name and so profane the name of your God. I am the Lord. You must not defraud your neighbor or rob him. You must not withhold until morning the wages due a hired hand. You must not curse the deaf or place a stumbling block before the blind, but you shall fear your God. I am the Lord. You must not pervert justice. You must not show partiality to the poor or favoritism to the rich. You are to judge your neighbor fairly. You must not go about spreading slander among your people. You must not endanger the life of your neighbor. I am the Lord. You must not harbor hatred against your brother in your heart. Directly rebuke your neighbor, so that you will not incur guilt on account of him. Do not seek revenge or bear a grudge against any of your people, but love your neighbor as yourself. I am the Lord. You are to keep my statutes. You shall not crossbreed two different kinds of livestock. You shall not sow your fields with two kinds of seed, and you shall not wear clothing made of two kinds of material. If a man lies carnally with a slave girl promised to another man, but who has not been redeemed or given her freedom, there must be due punishment, but they are not to be put to death, because she has not been freed. The man, however, must bring a ram to the entrance to the tent of meeting as his guilt offering to the Lord. The priest shall make atonement on his behalf before the Lord with the ram of the guilt offering for the sin he has committed, and he will be forgiven the sin he has committed. When you enter the land and plant any kind of tree for food, you shall regard the fruit as forbidden. For 3 years it will be forbidden to you and must not be eaten. In the 4th year, all its fruit must be consecrated as a praise offering to the Lord. But in the 5th year you may eat its fruit, thus your harvest will be increased. I am the Lord your God. You must not eat anything with blood still in it. You must not practice divination or sorcery. You must not cut off the hair at the sides of your head or clip off the edges of your beard. You must not make any cuts in your bodies for the dead, or put tattoo marks on yourselves. I am the Lord. You must not defile your daughter by making her a prostitute, or the land will be prostituted and filled with depravity. You must keep my Sabbaths and have reverence for my sanctuary. I am the Lord. You must not turn to mediums or spiritists. Do not seek them out, or you will be defiled by them. I am the Lord your God. You are to rise in the presence of the elderly, honor the aged, and fear your God. I am the Lord. When a foreigner resides with you in your land, you must not oppress him. You must treat the foreigner living among you as native-born and love him as yourself, for you were foreigners in the land of Egypt. I am the Lord your God. You must not use dishonest measures of length, weight, or volume. You shall maintain honest scales and weights, an honest ephah and an honest hin. I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt. You must keep all my statutes and all my ordinances and follow them. I am the Lord. Leviticus 20. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Tell the Israelites, any Israelite or foreigner living in Israel who gives any of his children to Molech must be put to death. The people of the land are to stone him. And I will set my face against that man and cut him off from his people, because by giving his offspring to Molech he has defiled my sanctuary and profaned my holy name. And if the people of the land ever hide their eyes and fail to put to death the man who gives one of his children to Molech, then I will set my face against that man and his family, and cut off from among their people both him and all who follow him in prostituting themselves with Molech. Whoever turns to mediums or spiritists to prostitute himself with them, I will also set my face against that person and cut him off from his people. Consecrate yourselves, therefore, and be holy, because I am the Lord your God, and you shall keep my statutes and practice them. I am the Lord who sanctifies you. If anyone curses his father or mother, he must be put to death. He has cursed his father or mother, his blood shall be upon him. If a man commits adultery with another man's wife, with the wife of his neighbor, Both the adulterer and the adulteress must surely be put to death. If a man lies with his father's wife, he has uncovered his father's nakedness. Both must surely be put to death. Their blood is upon them. If a man lies with his daughter-in-law, both must surely be put to death. They have acted perversely. Their blood is upon them. If a man lies with a man as with a woman, they have both committed an abomination. They must surely be put to death. Their blood is upon them. If a man marries a woman and her mother, it is depraved. Both he and they must be burned in the fire, so that there will be no depravity among you. If a man lies carnally with an animal, he must be put to death, and you are also to kill the animal. If a woman approaches any animal to mate with it, you must kill both the woman and the animal. They must surely be put to death. Their blood is upon them. If a man marries his sister, whether the daughter of his father or of his mother, and they have sexual relations, it is a disgrace. They must be cut off from the sight of their people. He has uncovered the nakedness of his sister. He shall bear his iniquity. If a man lies with a menstruating woman and has sexual relations with her, he has exposed the source of her flow, and she has uncovered the source of her blood. Both of them must be cut off from among their people. You must not have sexual relations with your sister or your mother or your father, for it is exposing one's own kin. Both shall bear their iniquity. If a man lies with his uncle's wife, he has uncovered the nakedness of his uncle. They will bear their sin. They shall die childless. If a man marries his brother's wife, it is an act of impurity. He has uncovered the nakedness of his brother. They shall be childless. You are therefore to keep all my statutes and ordinances, so that the land where I am bringing you to live will not vomit you out. You must not follow the statutes of the nations I am driving out before you, because they did all these things. I abhorred them. But I've told you that you will inherit their land, since I will give it to you as an inheritance, a land flowing with milk and honey. I am the Lord your God, who has set you apart from the peoples. You are therefore to distinguish between clean and unclean animals and birds. Do not be contaminated by any animal or bird or by anything that crawls on the ground. I have set these apart as unclean for you. You are to be holy to me, because I, the Lord, am holy, and I have set you apart from the nations to be my own. A man or a woman who is a medium or spiritist must surely be put to death. They shall be stoned. Their blood is upon them. Now over to the New Testament, Hebrews chapter 9. Now the first covenant had regulations for worship and also an earthly sanctuary. A tabernacle was prepared. In its first room were the lampstand, the table, and the consecrated bread. This was called the holy place. Behind the second curtain was a room called the most holy place, containing the golden altar of incense and the gold-covered ark of the covenant. Inside the ark were the gold jar of manna, Aaron's staff that had budded, and the stone tablets of the covenant. Above the ark were the cherubim of glory, overshadowing the mercy seat. But we cannot discuss these things in detail now. When everything had been prepared in this way, the priests entered regularly into the first room to perform their sacred duties. But only the high priest entered the second room, and then only once a year, and never without blood, which he offered for himself and for the sins of the people that the people had committed in ignorance. By this arrangement, the Holy Spirit was showing that the way into the most holy place had not yet been disclosed as long as the first tabernacle was still standing. It is an illustration for the present time because the gifts and sacrifices being offered were unable to cleanse the conscience of the worshiper. They consist only in food and drink and special washings, external regulations imposed until the time of reform. But when Christ came as high priest of the good things that have come, he went through the greater and more perfect tabernacle that is not made by hands and is not a part of this creation. He did not enter by the blood of goats and calves, but he entered the most holy place once for all by his own blood, thus securing eternal redemption. For if the blood of goats and bulls and the ashes of a heifer sprinkled on those who are ceremonially unclean sanctify them, so that their bodies are clean, how much more will the blood of Christ, who through the eternal Spirit offered himself unblemished to God, purify our conscience from the works of death, so that we may serve the living God? Therefore, Christ is the mediator of a new covenant, so that those who are called may receive the promised eternal inheritance now that he has died to redeem them from the transgressions committed under the first covenant. In the case of a will, it is necessary to establish the death of the one who made it, because a will does not take effect until the one who made it has died. It cannot be executed while he is still alive. That is why even the first covenant was not put into effect without blood. For when Moses had proclaimed every commandment of the law to all the people, he took the blood of calves and goats along with water, scarlet wool, and hyssop, and sprinkled the scroll and all the people, saying, "This is the blood of the covenant which God has commanded you to keep." In the same way, he sprinkled with blood the tabernacle and all the vessels used in worship. According to the law, in fact, nearly everything must be purified with blood, and without the shedding of blood there is no forgiveness. So it was necessary for the copies of the heavenly things to be purified with these sacrifices, but the heavenly things themselves with better sacrifices than these. For Christ did not enter into a man-made copy of the true sanctuary, but he entered heaven itself, now to appear on our behalf in the presence of God. Nor did he enter heaven to offer himself again and again, as the high priest enters the most holy place every year with blood that is not his own. Otherwise, Christ would have had to suffer repeatedly since the foundation of the world. But now he has appeared once for all at the end of the ages to do away with sin by the sacrifice of himself. Just as man is appointed to die once and after that to face judgment, so also Christ was offered once to bear the sins of many. And he will appear a second time, not to bear sin, but to bring salvation to those who eagerly await him. Hebrews chapter 10. For the law is only a shadow of the good things to come, not the realities themselves. It can never, by the same sacrifices offered year after year, make perfect those who draw near to worship. If it could, would not the offerings have ceased? For the worshippers would have been cleansed once for all and would no longer have felt the guilt of their sins. Instead, those sacrifices are an annual reminder of sins, because it is impossible for the blood of bulls and goats to take away sins. Therefore, when Christ came into the world, he said, "Sacrifice and offering you did not desire, but a body you prepared for me. In burnt offerings and sin offerings you took no delight. Then I said, Here I am. It is written about me in the scroll, I have come to do your will, O God." In the passage above, he says, "Sacrifices and offerings, burnt offerings and sin offerings you did not desire, nor did you delight in them, although they are offered according to the law." Then he adds, "Here I am. I have come to do your will." He takes away the first to establish the second. And by that will, we have been sanctified through the sacrifice of the body of Jesus Christ once for all. Day after day, every priest stands to minister and to offer again and again the same sacrifices, which can never take away sins. But when the priest had offered for all time one sacrifice for sins, he sat down at the right hand of God. Since that time, he waits for his enemies to be made a footstool for his feet, because by a single offering he has made perfect for all time those who are being sanctified. The Holy Spirit also testifies to us about this. First, he says, "This is the covenant I will make with them. After those days, declares the Lord, I will put my laws in their hearts and inscribe them on their minds." Then he adds, "Their sins and lawless acts I will remember no more. And where these have been forgiven, an offering for sin is no longer needed." Therefore, brothers, since we have confidence to enter the most holy place by the blood of Jesus, by the new and living way opened for us through the curtain of his body, and since we have a great priest over the house of God, let us draw near with a sincere heart and full assurance of faith, having our hearts sprinkled to cleanse us from a guilty conscience and our bodies washed with pure water. Let us hold resolutely to the hope we profess, for he who promised is faithful. And let us consider how to spur one another on to love and good deeds. Let us not neglect meeting together, as some have made a habit, but let us encourage one another, and all the more as you see the day approaching. If we deliberately go on sinning after we have received the knowledge of the truth, no further sacrifice for sins remains, but only a fearful expectation of judgment and of raging fire that will consume all adversaries. Anyone who rejected the law of Moses died without mercy on the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses. How much more severely do you think one deserves to be punished who has trampled on the Son of God, profaned the blood of the covenant that sanctified him, and insulted the Spirit of grace? For we know him who said, "Vengeance is mine, I will repay." And again, the Lord will judge his people. It is a fearful thing to fall into the hands of the living God. Remember the early days that you were in the light. In those days, you endured a great conflict in the face of suffering. Sometimes you were publicly exposed to ridicule and persecution. At other times, you were partners with those who were so treated. You sympathized with those in prison and joyfully accepted the confiscation of your property, knowing that you yourselves had a better and permanent possession. So do not throw away your confidence. It holds a great reward. You need to persevere, so that after you have done the will of God, you will receive what he has promised. For in just a little while, he who is coming will come and will not delay. But my righteous one will live by faith, and if he shrinks back, I will take no pleasure in him. But we are not of those who shrink back and are destroyed, but of those who have faith and preserve their souls. This is the word of the Lord. You can tell we kind of finally hit our breaking point here, and I just barely finished the reading, but yeah, a lot to think about here, huh? I hope you enjoy thinking about it. Hope you have a wonderful Sunday worship with your spiritual family tomorrow. Go to worship. It's super important. We were just warned in this last chapter, do not forsake to meet with your brothers and sisters in faith. Don't forsake the assembly. We need to gather to spur one another to good works. If you missed that, it's worth looking back, because everything in the Bible is important. So there's that. All right, we're going to conclude our time together. God bless you. I'll see you at the start of next week.